He was a good kid. He was a good boy, and I loved him with all my heart.
This video contains descriptions of child abuse, violence, and other distressing events that may be upsetting or triggering to viewers. In the quiet suburb of Roy, Utah, a story of hope and heartbreak unfolded, forever defining an entire community. What started as a family's trusting arrangement with a friend spiraled into a nightmare of unimaginable violence. This is the story of 2-year-old Alistair, his twin sister Laura, and the parents who loved them more than life itself, only to have their world shattered by someone they believed was safe. Alistair Kunzler was born on February 19, 2021, alongside his twin sister Laura, to parents Justin Kunzler and Brittany Harmon Kunzler. Though Alistair's time on Earth was heartbreakingly brief, the joy he brought to those around him was immeasurable. With thick hair and an appearance that resembled a little gentleman, Alistair had an endearing personality, marked by his radiant smile and the deep dimples that lit up his cheeks. His presence could brighten any room. Alistair loved watching the cartoon Teen Titans Go, and cherished his plush toy, Puss in Boots. A true daddy's boy, he adored snuggling with his father while they watched movies together. His favorite blanket, adorned with blue stars, was never far from his side. He shared a deep bond with his parents, often chatting and giggling with them, and held a particularly special place in the heart of his grandmother, Joanne, who adored him beyond measure. Losing Alistair has left an unfillable void in the hearts of those who loved him, a pain they will carry for the rest of their lives. He was loved beyond words, and will be missed more than can ever be expressed. The purpose of this video is to share his story, raise awareness about child protection, and emphasize the urgent need for action to prevent such tragedies. If you or someone you know has experienced abuse, please don't hesitate to reach out to local support services for help. Before tragedy struck, Alistair's parents, Justin and Brittany, were like many others in their close-knit community. High school sweethearts who had grown up just miles apart, they chose to settle in Roy after marrying, drawn by the promise of quiet streets, good schools, and a neighborhood where people looked out for one another. They bought a modest home on a tree-lined avenue, envisioning a future filled with backyard barbecues and the joyful sounds of tiny feet running through the house. In time, their dream came true with the arrival of twins, Alistair and Laura. From the moment they were born, the twins were inseparable. Alistair, older by just a few minutes, was the more outgoing of the two. Friends fondly remember him toddling around the yard, giggling at every new discovery. Laura, quieter but equally curious, often watched her brother's antics with wide-eyed fascination before joining in. Their parents joked that the twins were perfectly balanced. Alistair was the spark, and Laura was the steady flame. The parents had commitments. Some say it was an appointment, others mention a late work shift, and needed someone to watch the twins overnight. Dunn agreed without hesitation. For Alistair's parents, this likely came as a relief. Their children would be with someone familiar, someone who had cared for them before. As the sun set over the quiet streets of Roy, neighbors recall a sense of calm settling over the neighborhood. Children were being called inside for dinner, and the small town eased into its usual evening rhythm. But behind the closed doors of Dunn's home, any sense of normalcy was about to be replaced by something unimaginable. Dunn later told investigators that the evening began with games. But his idea of fun soon spiraled into violence. Reports indicate he repeatedly punched Alistair and his twin sister, targeting their backs, chests, and sides. He pinched them in sensitive areas, including their genitals, inflicting unbearable pain. At some point, Dunn began throwing the children onto a bed over and over, ignoring the fragility of their small 2-year-old bodies. Investigators also uncovered that he used a Nerf gun, a toy meant for harmless play, in cruel and sadistic ways. He shot at the twins with the projectiles and used the toy's butt end as a blunt weapon to strike them. The violence escalated further. Dunn forced the children's heads into the edges of a closet door and, in his confession, admitted to using a hard foam mallet to strike the backs of their heads. Medical experts would later confirm that the injuries were the result of repeated, deliberate blows, Not a single moment of lost control, but sustained, calculated brutality. At some point, Dunn must have realized the gravity of what he had done. Perhaps fear of punishment took hold, or perhaps he felt a fleeting sense of guilt. Investigators believe he attempted to cover his tracks by giving the children Tylenol and cough syrup, possibly to numb their pain or silence their cries. But by then, Alistair and his sister were already suffering from severe internal injuries caused by the relentless physical and sexual abuse. Sometime between 8:30 and 9 the next morning, Dunn noticed that Alistair had stopped breathing. Yet instead of calling for help immediately, he waited, allowing critical moments to slip away as Alistair's life hung in the balance. It wasn't until 10 a.m. that Dunn finally called 911, an inexcusable delay that underscored his callousness and disregard for the children's lives. When paramedics and law enforcement arrived, the horrifying scope of the tragedy was laid bare. Alistair was found unresponsive on the front porch, showing no signs of life. Inside, his twin sister lay on a couch, her body covered in bruises and visible injuries. Both children bore unmistakable evidence of physical and sexual trauma. The twins were rushed to a nearby hospital, where doctors and nurses fought desperately to save them. But Alistair's injuries, consistent with prolonged, severe physical and sexual abuse, were far too extensive. He passed away shortly after arriving, leaving the medical staff deeply shaken by the cruelty inflicted upon such a small, innocent child. Meanwhile, Alistair's twin sister was found to have a brain bleed, extensive bruising, and evidence of sexual assault. Although she survived, her prognosis was uncertain. The road to recovery would be long, filled with physical and emotional challenges. For Alistair's parents, the news of his death struck like lightning. They had left their children in trusted hands, believing they would be safe for one night. Instead, their world was irreparably shattered. In a tragic instant, the family lost their son, and their daughter's life was irrevocably altered. Friends described the parents as inconsolable, struggling to comprehend how someone they trusted could commit such a heinous act. In the days that followed, family members reminisced about Alistair's cheerful demeanor and his sister's quiet, observant nature. They recalled how he would approach strangers with open arms, treating everyone as a friend. They cherished memories of messy artwork, bedtime giggles, and the seemingly unbreakable bond between the twins, until that fateful night. A neighbor tearfully recounted how the twins would play with chalk on the sidewalk, drawing colorful flowers and shapes, while their parents watched proudly from the porch. An autopsy on Aleister confirmed what first responders and doctors already suspected. The child had suffered extensive blunt force trauma and sexual abuse. Bruises and contusions covered his torso, back, and limbs. The coroner's report also revealed chilling evidence of pinching and internal injuries consistent with sexual assault, corroborating Jonathan Dunn's confession of targeting the twins' genitals. It was the very definition of torture. His twin sister's injuries were equally disturbing. A life-threatening brain injury, bruises all over her body, and clear indications of sexual abuse. Doctors emphasized that the damage suggested ongoing, repeated assault rather than a single episode. Though she survived, the emotional and physical aftermath would be immeasurable. She would need therapy not only to heal her body, but also to process the horror of losing her brother in such a violent manner. The Roy City Police Department launched a comprehensive investigation as soon as they arrived on the scene. They found incriminating evidence throughout the home: blood spatter, displaced furniture, and objects bearing signs of impact. Dunn initially downplayed the severity, claiming he'd only been too rough. But this story quickly unraveled when confronted with the children's profound injuries and the physical evidence left behind. Investigators recovered the Nerf gun Dunn had misused, still bearing signs of improper use. They also found the so-called foam mallet. Each piece fit into a puzzle depicting a horrific spree of violence. Under increasing scrutiny, Dunn admitted he'd lost control, describing in detail how his rage had escalated and how he'd inflicted pain on the children. His confession left no doubt as to his guilt. The question then became why he'd had access to children in the first place. It didn't take long for authorities to uncover Dunn's 2017 child abuse conviction, where he had broken the arm of a 2-year-old. That should have served as an unmistakable warning for anyone considering allowing him near children again. Yet, incredibly, he had managed to re-enter this family's life. Whether the parents fully understood the gravity of his past offenses remains unclear. In small communities, there is often a tendency to offer second chances, or information about past convictions may not circulate as widely as it should. This discovery triggered a wave of public outrage. Neighbors were stunned to learn that a known abuser had once again gained access to a child care setting. Advocacy groups demanded answers, pushing for immediate reforms to prevent individuals like Dunn from getting close to vulnerable children. For many, this case symbolized not just one man's cruelty, but a systemic failure, gaps in monitoring and communication that allowed a known danger to resurface. By Thursday afternoon, Dunn was arrested. The charges he faced were nothing short of monstrous: aggravated murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated sexual abuse of a child. Prosecutors, aware of the extreme danger Dunn represented, successfully argued for him to be held without bail. The severity of the charges reflected the horrific nature of his actions, as well as the prolonged abuse he inflicted. As the legal process unfolded, the family and community stood by, watching closely. With Dunn's confessions and compelling forensic evidence, the prosecution built what many believed was an airtight case. In court, the anguished parents of Aleister and his sister spoke of their unbearable grief. Friends and extended family attended every hearing, their presence both a tribute to Aleister and a testament to the magnitude of the crime. Even as Dunn's guilt was established, one critical question lingered. How did this happen again? If the justice system was aware of Dunn's previous conviction, why was he free to be around children without any supervised restrictions? Child protection advocates pointed to the need for stronger laws that restrict or closely monitor convicted abusers post-release. They also stressed the importance of easily accessible public records, so families would be fully informed before entrusting a child to anyone's care. Some community members questioned the role of background checks, mental health evaluations, and parole requirements. It was unclear whether Dunn had mandatory check-ins or therapy sessions after his 2017 conviction. Many believed that the entire safety net had failed Aleister and his twin sister, parents, neighbors, parole officers, and the broader social services system, each playing an unwitting role in allowing Dunn to slip back into a caretaker role. For Aleister's mother and father, life would never be the same. They returned to a house once echoing with the sound of twins giggling, now an unthinkable reminder of the darkest night of their lives. Some close friends say the parents considered moving, unable to bear the daily memories. Others mention how they poured their energy into their surviving daughter's recovery, sitting at her hospital bedside and later helping her through countless therapy sessions. This little girl, once a quiet observer to her brother's outgoing ways, faced surgeries, ongoing checkups, and a mountain of emotional healing. Experts indicated she would need long-term trauma counseling. Extended family members rallied around her, determined she would be surrounded by love and support, even in her brother's absence. Aleister's short life left a profound mark on Roy. Vigils were held at the local church, where community members lit candles and prayed for the grieving family. Handmade signs bearing Aleister's name appeared along fences, urging passers-by to remember Aleister and protect our children. Online, people nationwide learned of the case through true crime forums and social media updates. Anger, sadness, and confusion abounded. How could such brutality be inflicted on a child known for his bright smile and fearless curiosity? And how could a convicted abuser so easily slip through the cracks to repeat his violent tendencies? Yet, amid the sorrow, there were glimmers of resilience. Strangers donated to help cover medical bills and funeral expenses, showing a community united in compassion. Child advocacy organizations used Aleister's story to call for policy changes, hoping no family would ever endure a similar nightmare. Although the legal process brought some measure of accountability with Jonathan Dunn behind bars, likely for the rest of his life, Aleister's parents continued to grapple with their loss. Every holiday, An empty seat at the table reminded them of the bright-eyed boy who should have been there. Every milestone in his twin sister's life was a poignant reminder of what Aleister could have become. Still, Aleister's spirit lived on in the stories people shared. How he loved drawing squiggly animals in crayon, chasing bubbles in the backyard, and giving tight hugs to anyone he met. To honor him, some family members started a local fund for child protection awareness, supporting legislative efforts to strengthen background checks on potential caregivers. The tragedy in Roy served as a stark reminder of how quickly a trusted bond can be shattered and how innocent lives can be lost when dangerous individuals slip through the cracks meant to protect children. This case calls for action, for parents to stay vigilant, for neighbors to speak up if they sense danger, and for policymakers to close the gaps that let predators slip by. Aleister's life, though heartbreakingly short, galvanized the community to reflect on its moral duty to protect the youngest among them. His sister's survival stands as a testament to human resilience in the face of overwhelming cruelty. Though she will carry scars, both visible and invisible, she also carries a legacy of love from her family and community, committed to shielding her from further harm. This is the story of Aleister, a cherished 2-year-old boy whose boundless energy and sweet nature brought warmth to everyone around him, whose promising future was stolen by an act of pure malice. May his memory inspire us all to uphold our collective duty to protect innocent children and demand accountability from a system that must do better to keep them safe. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone who watched this video all the way through. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case in the comments, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel.